Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today guys, we're taking a look at a new build. Something that I've done in the past, but I changed the name, I changed its pretty much its setup and how it works in a lot of ways, but I brought with it some new dynamic play. So the idea behind this build is it is called the Slayer, and it is a hunter of werewolves and undead and vampires. It is pretty much a slayer of monsters, very much like Van Helsing was. So the idea here is that it's a vampire, well, a slayer of monsters. So I really felt like for this, the whole idea of it and the theme of it, you guys will kind of catch on when you see it. It has a lot of flexibility in it, just like all of my builds, but this one has a little bit more because it's more geared towards the hybrid play. So let's go ahead and take a look at the build. As you can see, we are an Imperial Templar with this. Imperial's a really good one for the build because it gets increased stamina, increased health. It also gets some other perks with it, but any race will really play this build well, and some races are going to be more adequate at it than others. So as you can see, the way we have our attributes split up, we have 14 into Magicka, 50 into Stamina. We do have 24k Magicka, 21k health, 29, almost 30k Stamina, with a 612 Mag recovery and a 718 Stamina recovery. Our weapon damage is coming in at 2540, spell damage 1672, spell crit is 45, our weapon crit is 53, and then we have 15k spell and physical resistance. We are running the Thief of Mundstone because we want that higher crit chance. We do have Major Savagery at all times, and we also have Major Prophecy, at all times. So both Major Savagery and Major Prophecy. We also have Tri-Stat Food to give us the mix of stats on our food. So go back in here. So here we are in the gear. And potion-wise, Tri-Stats are going to be your best bet. But you can use Warrior Power Pots or Spellcaster Pots depending on what role you want to play. You can also use the Grapes and Ash Yam food for if you want just more Magicka stamina and less health, and it will drop your health quite substantially, just to show you. So it does drop your health quite a bit, but it gives you a much larger Magicka stamina pool. It's really dependent on the player, on what they want to use. Personally, I like having the fallback of the Tri-Stat, mainly because I get that extra health, and just playing sometimes, having that extra health can really lay into a build really well. So, moving on now to our equipment that we have equipped, starting with our monster set. And our monster set is optional, but at the same time I think it fits the premise here. The idea is that you are a holy kind of slayer, and you call upon the powers of the gods or the heavens to kind of give you the necessary tools to defeat your enemies. So the first set we have is Grothdar's. Now Grothdar's is a really powerful set, regardless of what a lot of people think, especially if you are an up-close melee damage person. Mag DK, Mag Templar, a lot of that you can take advantage of this. So the set itself gives you 1 piece max Magicka, 2 piece when you deal damage you have a 10% chance to create lava pools that swirl around you, dealing X amount of flame damage to all enemies within 8 meters of you every second for 5 seconds. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds. So it's got a really good damage capability, but it's also got a good amount of proc, because it's pretty much going to go off all the time because you have a lot of dots going on. The next set we're running is Briarheart. Now Briarheart's is an interesting set and a really good set because of the changes they made to it. So interesting in the fact that the 2 and 4 piece are crit, the 3 piece is max stamina, just like Hunding's Rage. And then on the 5 piece, when you deal critical damage, you have a 25% chance to increase your weapon damage by 450 for 10 seconds. While this effect is active, your critical strikes heal you for 415, and that's every time you deal a critical strike. it doesn't matter, and this effect can occur once every 15 seconds. So you basically get 10 seconds of uptime and a 5-second downtime in between activations. It's really still a powerful one. Now the next one is kind of a interesting set, because it's not a widely used set, but it is a really good set if you're looking for something to give you spell crit all the time, and that is Treasure Hunters. So Treasure Hunters adds 2-piece Max Magicka, 3 and 4-piece spell crit, just like Julianus. The 5-piece gives you spell damage, and then has an extra 5-piece bonus called Gain Major Prophecy at all times, increasing your spell critical rating by 2191. This way, if you're playing somebody who uses Magicka but doesn't use Inner Light, you have access to this Major Prophecy at all times. It's a really kind of a powerful set, but not widely used, because Major Prophecy can be gotten easily from a lot of other things. The problem is that it's either attached to a potion or Inner Light. There's not a lot of other sources for it, so this kind of helps out when you need it. And in this case, since we're a hybrid, it really plays well into the build. Now, going over the traits and enchants. So the traits we have on our gear are, on our helm, we have Reinforced, because we are using a 5-piece medium where our helm is going to be heavy, our shoulders are going to be light, and we are going to have that tri-stat enchant there, the Reinforced for the increased resistances. And then on the body, we're going to have Invigorating. Now, you don't have to use Invigorating. This is just an option. I like using Invigorating because I like getting a little bit of extra recovery rate, especially if I'm using a tri-stat pot, because it does boost all my recovery rates. So it does play into that really well. The tri-stat, of course, is to give you those mixed stats. And then, of course, on the leggings, Invigorating with the tri-stat. Now, on the small pieces, we are going to be doing something different here. We're going to have split stats. We're going to have Magicka and Stamina, both Divines on the shoulder, gloves, and belts and boots. Now, the Stamina is on the boots and the gloves, Magicka, shoulder, and belt. And this is so you can get more of that Magicka, more of that Stamina for a more well-balanced build. And then moving on to jewelry, of course, we do have the non-Trirune on one of these. Now, the reason I left one of these without Trirune is just to show you that you can still play without Trirune if you don't want it, but also I wanted to show you with Trirune the difference. So this gives you 870 Magicka, this gives you 435 Magicka, Stamina, and then 478 health. This just gives you a more well-balanced amount of resources. Now, if I were to take this and change it into a tri-stat, yes, my Magicka would go down to 23,000, my Stamina would go up, and my health would go up. That's about all that would happen. So I'd go to 22k health. It would be, almost 23, probably 23,000 max Stamina, and then I'd lose that there. Now, the necklace, of course, infused, but this time we are using the Alchemical Acceleration Enchantment. Now, this reduces the cooldown of your potions below the item's level by 8 seconds. So this one increases the infused increases jewelry enhancement effectiveness by 60%. So it does give you 8 seconds reduced potion time. So you can actually fire potions off more effectively. And this build really needs that kind of extra, especially on the Imperial race. So, moving on to weapons now. Main hand, we are using a sharpened flame damage weapon. Again, this kind of falls into you're a hunter, so you might not necessarily use some of the things that other build types do. So having that sharpened just gives you that extra little bit of spell and physical pin. And you're going to go, well, why would you use one of those if you're not going to be fully sharpened out and getting a lot more penetration? The reason is because if you have somebody who puts minor or major penetration on the enemies, that's 5,280 extra penetration. This just adds a little bit more, and actually it adds enough to give you 2% more damage on your attacks. Now, using a sword on the main hand, this also increases your damage by 2.5%. So you're getting actually 4.5% increase in damage by the math. So it's actually kind of nice. Then moving on, the flame is just there basically because it can apply burning, and you can apply it quite often, but that burning also gets enhanced if somebody puts down a wall of elements, and so you get that extra fire damage out of it. The next thing we have here is, of course, an absorbed stamina enchant on an infused weapon. This does increased physical damage and gives you back 230 stamina. So this just helps you stay with stamina, and it's a kind of a good thing. So, and the infused really plays well into it. And then, of course, moving on to the bow, we are using an infused bow with a weapon spell damage enchant. This just gives you that enhancement of weapon spell damage. Plays into the build really well. Alright, moving on now to skills. So the skills we have on our bar are optional, all of them. You can pick and choose the ones you really want to use or what have you if you feel like you can get something else out of it in the way it plays, but the ones I prefer to use is what I'm going to show you. So of course, starting with the first skill we have on our bar, we have Rending Slashes. Now this does a good amount of damage up front, good amount of damage over 10 seconds, and it gives you a nice way to use other abilities as a spammable, so you can focus on having one spammable. Now the next ability, you would say Biting Jabs would be better. It is a good ability. It also grants you that Major Savagery, but you already have Major Savagery. So this is what I use instead, and that's Bloodthirst, and this deals X amount of damage every with 5 consecutive hits. The final hit deals 300% more damage and heals you for 69% of the damage done. Now, as you're hitting the 5 consecutive times, you will proc your enchant for the stamina recovery. And then shortly after you do this and you go into your light attack, it'll proc it again. So you can actually get 2 procs out of it in succession. It's actually quite nice. And then, of course, moving on to the next thing here, we do have Vampire's Bane. This is a great ability. It does damage up front, it does damage over time, and it does flame damage. Now, if you didn't know this, and a lot of people don't realize this, NPC vampires do take increased flame damage. That's the other reason for Grothdars and this set, is it plays well into that idea. And the whole theme of this is we're going into Greymoor, so having that ability to take on those vampires is going to be really good for some people. The next skill we have is Deadly Cloak. This just gives you an AoE gives you major evasion for 10 seconds, reducing your incoming damage from area attacks by 25%. And every second, the shrapnel will pulse, dealing X amount of physical damage to all enemies within 5 meters. And then, of course, we have our next ability, and this one is really cool, and that is Camouflaged Hunter. This plays into this whole idea, the Slayer thing. You have Major Savagery, increasing your weapon critical by 2191, and then you also gain Minor Berserk for 5 seconds after you deal critical damage to an enemy in their flank, increasing your damage done by 8%. So this is actually a really cool skill with how it works, and they did make this change recently. It used to not have the Minor Berserk on it, now it does, and it really does a great job. The other ability we have here is Flawless Dawnbreaker. This is our ultimate. This does 9k damage up front, does 10k damage over 6 seconds, and then it also increases your weapon damage by 300 for 20 seconds. This is your primary damage ability ultimate. You're going to use this a lot. Moving on to the back bar. First ability we have is Venom Arrow. Again, remember, being a hunter, you have to be able to react to the situation with your abilities, and if you see an enemy at a distance, especially like a evil necromancer casting a spell, you can fire at them, interrupt them, set them off balance, and stun them for 3 seconds, so that way you can keep them from casting some of those major hitting abilities. The next ability we have, and it works on more than just Magicka players, it works against anyone who's getting ready to use an ability. It says casting an ability, so it means any skill. Next, we have Arrow Barrage, great ability for damage over time. It does only last 8 seconds with a 2-second delay on damage, but Endless Hail only lasts 10 seconds, or only lasts 12 seconds, so it only gets 2 more seconds, but it still has that delay. Next ability we have is Ritual Retribution, great AoE heal, great damage over time, and it's a great synergy. So, excuse me. Moving on, Radiant Aura. This is a great resistance buff, or not resistance buff, AoE ability that you can use to get Magicka Steel on multiple targets. It's really good for you. It's also really good for your group, but while you have it on the back bar, while it's slotted, you get minor fortitude, minor endurance, and minor intellect, increasing health, stamina, and mag recovery. So this kind of gives you that extra recovery when you're on the back bar and you're using your bow abilities, you're putting down all these other things, and then you throw this out and you get that Magicka Steel. So this plays really well in group settings, but also at the same time it plays into your ability as well. Now, if you don't want to use this ability, there is the Restoring Light ability, Restoring Focus, and this will give you stamina back, but it also gives you the physical spell resist. So you do have some choices here, but I do like using this. The next one, of course, we have is Camouflage Hunter again for the Minor Berserk and the other thing. And then, last but not least, we have Ballista. Ballista is a great ability because it summons a bow that just rapid fires at an enemy over 5 seconds, dealing 44,616 damage, and it allows you to keep doing your rotation. So it's a really powerful ability, but at the same time, it gives you some flexibility. Now, I am going to go over all the skills I have unlocked, starting with Adric Spear. We have Empowering Sweep, Biting Jabs, Binding Javelin, Toppling Charge, Blazing Spear, Blazing Shield, and these are all skills that you can swap out with other skills anytime you need to for different types of play. We also have Solar Prison, Vampire's Bane, Solar Barrage, which is another great AoE ability. You have Purifying Light, which is a great ability for stacking damage and also giving your group another heal. Then we have Unstable Core. This is a good ability with how it works. I like to use this on trash sometimes, just to irk them, because you know they don't have any feelings, so you know that the devs are getting irked by it. But it works out really well when you can make their direct damage attack basically blast back at them. It's really cool. Then you have Radiant Oppression. This is a great ability because it does a lot of damage over 1.8 seconds. It's a channel ability and it deals 480% more damage to enemies below 50% health. It's a great execute ability if you want to use it. Now, Restoring Light. We have Practice Incarnation. It's a great way to heal your group and also to gain immunity to disabling effects. Honor the Dead's a great burst heal. And then you have Ritual of Retribution, which is a great AoE heal. And then, of course, Ritual Rebirth. And then you have the Radiant Aura, and then Ritual Retribution and Restoring Focus. All really good abilities. Moving on to weapons. Dual Wield. I do have Rend unlocked. This is a great damage over time ability if you want some damage stacking on the dual wield side instead of using the Dawnbreaker. But Dawnbreaker does give you that 300 weapon damage, so either one really works. You also have Bloodthirsty, which we've already seen, Rending Slashes, and then Steel Tornado. This is a great AoE ability, and it has a nice radius of 9 meters. So if you want this in a group in a dungeon to clear trash, it's a great spammable. And then you have Deadly Cloak, and then of course Shrouded Daggers. Another way of getting that major brutality for yourself for 20 seconds is using this skill. So, and it can also do the same thing that your arrow can, where it interrupts, sets an enemy off balance, and stuns them for 3 seconds. We do have bow abilities, Ballista, Focused Aim, great way of getting that minor fracture applied to enemies. Arrow Barrage, Magnum Shot's a great way to get knock enemies back at a distance, and it does do damage, so it's kind of a nice one. Then we have Bombard. It's a good CC because it does immobilize enemies for 4 seconds by 40% movement speed, and it deals damage to all enemies it hits. It's a nice ability, but it works better when you have the bow that benefits from that same skill. Then we have Venom Arrow, of course, for that stun and stuff. And then moving on to armor, we are using medium armor. I do like to use a Lewd because it gives you that... this one gives you Major Expedition, increasing your movement speed by 5 seconds. And it's nice to be able to have that fast movement, especially in PvP or something. World skills, we do have Soul Magic, Shatter Soul, Consuming Trap, and of course the passives. And then Fighters Guild, we have Flawless Dawnbreaker, Silver Shards because we are a hunter, we have Turn Evil because we are a hunter, we can make the enemies run in fear and terror, and it also gives you that minor endurance and minor protection when you cast it. Upon activation, enemies in the area are feared for 5 seconds, so it does stun them, so it's a nice AoE CC. And then of course Camouflaged Hunter and Barbed Trap. Mages Guild, we have Shooting Star, great flame damage ability for damage up front and damage over time, and then on top of that, it generates 12 ultimate for each enemy hit. It's a great way to get ultimate back to do something else. So like you drop Shooting Star, then you get ultimate back to do Dawnbreaker really quick. It's a nice trade-off. And then of course we do have the Inner Light ability. You don't really need it unless you need more Max Magicka. Degeneration, great way to get major sorcery to increase your spell damage. Volcanic Ruin, great CC ability. It knocks enemies in the air and lasts for 36 seconds. It's like a trap, but it's really good. Then you have Spell Symmetry, which is a great trade-off for health to Magicka. Templars get this, you know, they get this. Just gives you a better way of managing Magicka, especially if you're playing a healer. It works out really well. Psijic Order, we do have Temporal Guard. This gives you, while slotted, minor protection and reducing the damage you take from by 8%. And then it gives you this step backwards thing. It's really good in both PvE and PvP, I find. It just depends on the situation, again. Time Freeze, another good one. Elemental Weapon, I know sounds weird why you're using a magic damage ability, but it's actually quite powerful because it does apply the burning, concussed, and shield status effects to the enemy. And if you don't activate it, like if it doesn't consume, the power is not consumed in time, you get some magicka back. It's a nice trade-off. And then of course we also have Channeled Acceleration. It's a nice way to get that minor force for 36 seconds. It does have a cast time, but that's okay. It plays into the build still pretty well. We also have Min Spirit. This is a great heal, and it does have that way of applying that major resolve to your enemies, increasing physical and spell resistance for 5 seconds, or to your allies, I mean. And the heal is excellent for an extra heal. We also have Deep Thoughts. Now this gives you extra Magicka stamina back and healing, but you go into this meditative state to get those resources. It can be a nice way to just kind of keep yourself in resources for like quick bursts. Undawn in line, we do have Sanguine Altar. Tangling Web's a great CC ability again, and it's also a synergy. All these here are synergies, by the way. We have Inner Beast for a ranged taunt if we want to tank, or if you want to like help your tank by keeping trash off the healer or whatever, you can do that. We also have Spike Bone Shield for if we want to tank, or you want some way of mitigating damage because you're struggling through an area or something. This is a great tool to use. It also directs some of the damage back to the enemy. And then of course we have Mystic Orb. This is a great way to give resources to your allies besides your Blazing Spear, but it does do a little bit more damage as it passes, and that synergy is awesome because it explodes damage. And then of course we have the 2 Undaunted passives. Also, when you get any skills from any skill line, whatever, make sure you unlock the passives. Assault skills, Aggressive Horn, really good for group play, both in PvE and PvP. Resolving Vigor is a great self-heal for you to keep yourself in the fight. It does heal for a lot more than Echoing Vigor, but that's the trade-off. It heals you for more. Razor Caltrops, great ability to get major fracture on enemies. This can be something you can use on the back bar if you want to drop Ritual of Retribution. It's a nice way to get that major fracture. Support skills, Refreshing Barrier, really good way to kind of save the group kind of moment, and anytime the ward wears off, you get 4 ultimate and 100 magicka back, so it allows you to get an easier way of getting this built back up so you can cast it again. Then we have Efficient Purge, great way for cleansing negative effects off allies. Works in some trials, some dungeons, really well. And then of course we have Stalwart Guard. This is a great way to put minor force on you and somebody else. Great ability. But it also takes 30% of the damage and puts it to you. So make sure you have some defensive capabilities. Being an Imperial, we do get toughness, increase max health by 2,000. We get Imperial Metal, increasing stamina by 2,000, and then Red Diamond. This is where this kind of shines with the Templar, is it reduces the cost of all abilities by 3%. This includes ultimates, you name it. And then being a Templar, you also get reduced cost of all things by 5%, ultimate, stamina abilities, and magic abilities. But this also reduces the cost of health abilities too, so it's nice. But also, whenever you deal damage, you heal yourself and restore magic and stamina every 5 seconds. The reason why we don't build so much into recovery with this build is because of this and all the other things you have that give you resources back. And then, of course, crafting, alchemy, medicinal use, and provisioning, gourmand, and connoisseur. Now, moving on to champion points, and this is where things are pretty normal, as pretty regular as normal. When it comes to how I do my layout, I use a universal CP system or setup, so I can just place my points, go play the game. I don't have to worry about resetting them all the time, because I've just got a good balance of everything. So moving on to the red tree, we have 56 in the Ironclad. This reduces your damage taken from direct damage attacks by 20%. We do have 34 in the medium armor focus. This increases your physical resistance by 2980 while wearing 5 or more pieces of medium armor. Templars get an increased spell resistance, so you want to get that good balance in there to compensate. And we have 4 in the spell shield, increasing spell resistance by 413. Moving on, we have 31 into thick skin. This reduces your damage taken from damage over time effects by 13%. 43 into hardy. This reduces your damage taken from physical, poison, disease damage by 10%. And 43 into elemental expert. This reduces your damage taken from flame, frost, shock, or magic damage by 10%. Moving on again, we have 40 into bastion. This increases the effectiveness of your damage shields by 16%. 19 into quick recovery, increasing your healing received by 5%. And then moving on to the green tree, we have 40 into Warlord, reducing break free cost by 16%. 16 into Sprinter and Bashing Focus. I'm going to do them both at the same time. This one reduces sprint cost by 10%. This reduces bash cost by 10%. Saves you resources. Moving on to the green tree, we have 75 into Mooncalf, increasing stam recovery by 14%, and 43 into Arcanist, increasing mag recovery by 10%. Moving on, 40 into Tumbling. This reduces your dodge roll cost by 16%, and 40 into Shadow Ward, reducing your block cost by 16%. Both of these do save you a lot of resources. Moving on to the blue tree, this is where we have things hybridized. So we have 43 into Blessed, increasing healing done by 10%. 23 into Elfborn, increasing critical damage and critical healing with magic abilities by 10%. 43 into Elemental Expert, increasing Flame, Frost, Shock, and magic damage by 10%. And then moving on to the middle tree, we have 35 into Physical Weapon Expert, increasing your light and heavy attacks with all stamina weapons and werewolf form by 20%. And then, of course, we also have 40 into Master at Arms, increasing your direct damage done by 16%. Moving on over here, we have 43 into Mighty, increasing your physical, poison, disease damage by 10%. We do have 23 into Precise Strikes, increasing your critical damage and critical healing with stamina abilities by 10%. And then 20 into Thaumaturge, increasing your damage done with damage over time effects by 9%. Now, it probably doesn't seem like you're going to get much DPS from those things, but let's go ahead and see how it works out in the dungeon. So we're going to go down here, we're going to run through the dungeon and just fight our way up to the first boss as usual. So, and again, before anyone says anything, there is a reason why I use this dungeon. It is very easy to get into the dungeon. It is very easy to get to the boss, and it allows just for a really easy just kind of gameplay. Like, you can do so much. Now, if you notice also, I'm actually healing for quite a bit, and it's not just because of my one ability, it's actually because of the mix of things, including the Briarheart. Come on. Bam. Right to the face, look at that. Caught him on fire. Alright. Moving on to the next room. And if you notice, I also keep my Magicka buff up all the time, so I'm constantly getting Magicka steal. So anytime I deal damage to any of these mobs, it doesn't matter if it's AoE or regular, I'm getting 300 magicka back. So I can stay in magicka really well and still focus on all this stamina and magicka abilities. So it's a really nice trade-off. The problem is that you do wind up using a little bit more stamina, so it is important to throw some heavy attacks in there in between some of your rotation. And that's just, again, to get your resources coming in, so you can maintain those higher resources. Now, I might struggle with this because I don't have a resistance buff, but I'm going to try and do my best and take this guy out. So, don't break off! Rolling out of the way. Run, 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 run! Ow, ow, ow. It's like acid on my feet. Get some health back. Get some other healing going on. And I died. But that's okay. If I was using my resistance buff, it would have worked out better. I would have had a better chance of survival. And I would have also had minor mending up most of the time more effectively. So it does play a big difference in there. But that is pretty much the Slayer build, guys. That is how it works. That's how it's set up. And again, remember, all skills, traits, enchants, Mundastones, even gear sets are optional. And you can choose which ones you want to use, which ones you don't want to use. You can even change out some of the sets for other sets if you feel like you could get something more out of something else. It's really up to you. And that is it for the build, guys. I hope you guys liked it. And if you did, you guys know what's coming next. Go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day. And this guy might see you in game. Bye.